The video had already been viewed 14 million times before the sun rose over Providence, Rhode Island. It showed a young man in designer clothes, Brandon Mitchell, 24, shoving an elderly man to the ground outside the Veterans Memorial Center on a cold Tuesday evening. The victim's head struck the concrete steps with a sickening thud. But Brandon didn't stop. He stood over the fallen man, laughing, filming it on his phone, mocking him. "Get up, old man. What are you gonna do about it?" The victim was 78-year-old Harold Patterson, a decorated Korean War veteran who had served 3 tours of duty, earned 2 Purple Hearts, and spent the last 30 years of his life volunteering at the same veterans center where he was attacked. Every child in that neighborhood knew Mr. Patterson. He taught them chess. He told them stories of courage. He handed out candy on Halloween and coats in winter. Harold Patterson was not just a man. He was a pillar, a monument, a living testament to everything America claims to honor. And Brandon Mitchell had broken 3 of his ribs, fractured his hip, and left him bleeding on those cold steps, all because Mr. Patterson had politely asked him to stop blocking the entrance while smoking. "Do you know who my father is?" Brandon had screamed while witnesses gathered. "Nobody touches me. Nobody." Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up first. Then national outlets. Then it exploded across every social media platform in the country. #Justice for Harold trended for 6 consecutive days. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Veterans organizations demanded maximum sentencing. Politicians released statements. Celebrities shared the video with outrage. But it wasn't just the brutality that enraged America. It was the arrogance. Brandon Mitchell wasn't just any young man. He was the son of Captain Richard Mitchell, one of the most respected police chiefs in Rhode Island's history. A man who had dedicated 32 years to law enforcement. A man whose name was synonymous with integrity. The pressure was unbearable. How would the justice system handle this? Would the son of a powerful man receive special treatment? Would connections and influence shield him from consequences? The case was assigned to municipal court, and to one particular judge whose reputation for fairness had made him a national icon. Judge Frank Caprio. The man who had made millions cry with his compassionate rulings. The man who looked into the eyes of every defendant and saw a human being. The man who believed in second chances, but also believed, deeply and unshakably, in accountability. The trial date was set. The courtroom would be packed. The nation would be watching. But a revelation no one expected was about to change everything inside that tribunal. The Providence Municipal Courthouse had never seen a crowd like this. By 7 a.m., the line stretched around the block. Journalists from every major network fought for seats. Camera crews set up across the street. Protesters held signs, "Justice for Harold." "No one is above the law." "Honor our veterans." Inside courtroom 3, every seat was filled. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and barely contained fury. Veterans in uniform sat in the front rows, medals gleaming on their chests, their faces carved from stone. At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff's voice cut through the silence. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Frank Caprio presiding. Judge Caprio entered slowly, his black robe flowing behind him. At 83 years old, his silver hair and kind eyes had become famous across America. But today, there was something different in his expression. Something harder. He surveyed the courtroom, nodded once, and took his seat. "Be seated." The side door opened, and Brandon Mitchell was led in by 2 officers. He was wearing an expensive suit, Armani, by the look of it. His hair was perfectly styled. His shoes gleamed. And on his face was a smirk that made several people in the gallery gasp audibly. He walked to the defendant's table as if he were entering a country club, not a court of law. He adjusted his cuffs. He whispered something to his attorney that made him chuckle. Judge Caprio watched in silence. His eyes never left Brandon's face. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of decades on the bench, "you stand accused of aggravated assault against Mr. Harold Patterson, a 78-year-old veteran. How do you plead?" Brandon leaned toward his microphone, still smirking. "Not guilty, Your Honor. It was self-defense." The old man grabbed my arm first. A wave of angry murmurs swept through the courtroom. Judge Caprio raised one hand, and silence fell instantly. "Self-defense," the judge repeated slowly. "Against a 78-year-old man with a cane." "He shouldn't have touched me," Brandon replied, shrugging. "I have a right to defend myself. Besides, he's fine now, isn't he? People are making a big deal out of nothing." "A big deal out of nothing." Judge Caprio removed his glasses and set them down carefully. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave. "Mr. Mitchell, that nothing you refer to includes 3 fractured ribs, a broken hip that required surgery, and a traumatic brain injury that has left Mr. Patterson with permanent memory problems. That nothing has cost a decorated war hero the ability to live independently. That nothing has broken the heart of an entire community." Brandon shifted in his seat, his smirk faltering for the first time. "I'd like to call Mr. Harold Patterson to give his statement," Judge Caprio announced. The courtroom held its breath as the side door opened again. Harold Patterson entered in a wheelchair, pushed by his daughter. He was smaller than he appeared in photographs, frail now, diminished by his injuries. But his eyes were clear, and when he looked at the crowd, he straightened his spine with the discipline of a soldier. He was wheeled to the witness area. A microphone was adjusted for him. "Mr. Patterson," Judge Caprio said gently, "please, in your own words, tell us what happened that evening." The old veteran took a shaky breath. "Your Honor, I've been going to that Veterans Center for 30 years. 30 years. It's my second home. That evening, this young man was blocking the entrance, smoking. There were elderly folks trying to get inside, folks in wheelchairs, folks with walkers. I asked him politely. I said, 'Excuse me, son, would you mind stepping aside so these folks can get through?' He paused, his voice cracking. He looked at me like I was dirt beneath his shoe. He said things I won't repeat in this courtroom. And then he shoved me. I fell backward and hit my head on those steps. I remember the pain. I remember the cold. And I remember him standing over me, laughing, filming me while I bled." Tears rolled down the faces of people in the gallery. Several veterans bowed their heads. "I served my country for 8 years," Mr. Patterson continued. "I watched friends die in Korea. I came home, raised a family, worked hard, paid my taxes, and tried to give back to my community every single day. And this is how I'm treated? On the steps of a building meant to honor men and women who sacrificed everything." His daughter placed a hand on his shoulder. He took a moment to compose himself. "I don't want revenge, Your Honor. I just want to understand. When did we become a country where respecting your elders, respecting veterans, respecting basic human decency became optional? When did we start raising children who believe they're above the law because of who their father is?" The courtroom was utterly silent. Brandon Mitchell was no longer smirking. His face had gone pale. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, do you have anything to say to Mr. Patterson?" Brandon's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Brandon pushed him away. "Look, I didn't mean for him to get hurt that bad, okay? Things got out of hand. But you can't put this all on me. He shouldn't have." "Shouldn't have what?" Judge Caprio's voice thundered through the courtroom, silencing Brandon instantly. "Shouldn't have asked you to show basic courtesy? Shouldn't have expected you to behave like a civilized human being?" The judge's face was flushed with controlled anger. I have sat on this bench for over 40 years, Mr. Mitchell. I have seen thousands of defendants. I have seen genuine remorse. I have seen people who made terrible mistakes and took full responsibility. But what I see in front of me today is something that genuinely troubles me. A young man who still, even after seeing the damage he caused, cannot bring himself to simply say, "I was wrong. I'm sorry." Brandon opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, there was movement at the back of the courtroom. A figure in the last row stood up slowly. Heads turned. Whispers erupted. Judge Caprio's eyes widened slightly in recognition. And then someone rose from the back of the courtroom. The man who stood was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore the unmistakable bearing of someone who had spent a lifetime in uniform. His hair was gray, his face weathered by decades of service, and his eyes, the same blue eyes as Brandon, were filled with something that looked like physical pain. Captain Richard Mitchell, Police Chief of Providence. 32 years of decorated service. A man whose integrity was legendary throughout New England. And Brandon Mitchell's father. The entire courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. "Your Honor," Captain Mitchell said, his voice steady but heavy, "may I approach?" Judge Caprio studied him for a long moment. The two men had known each other for years, had shared stages at community events, had mutual respect built over decades. "Captain Mitchell, this is highly irregular." "I know, Your Honor. But I believe I have something important to say. Something the court needs to hear." Judge Caprio looked at Brandon, who had gone white as a sheet. The young man was shaking his head frantically, mouthing, "No, Dad, don't." "Approach," Judge Caprio said quietly. Captain Mitchell walked forward slowly. Every step echoed in the silent courtroom. He passed his son without looking at him and stood before the bench, his hands clasped in front of him. "Your Honor, members of this court," he began, "I have been a police officer for 32 years. I have dedicated my life to upholding the law, to protecting this community, to teaching my officers that justice must be blind, that it cannot favor the rich over the poor, the powerful over the weak, or a father's son over anyone else." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "I came here today intending to sit in the back, unseen, and to let justice take its course. But I have listened to my son speak in this courtroom, and I cannot remain silent." He turned slowly to look at Brandon, and what the courtroom saw in his eyes broke hearts. "Brandon, I have failed you." Brandon's face crumbled. "I gave you everything you wanted and nothing you needed. I gave you money, cars, opportunities, but I didn't give you character. I didn't give you humility. I didn't give you respect for others. And when you showed signs of becoming this, I looked away. I made excuses. I told myself you would grow out of it." His voice hardened. "But a man doesn't grow out of cruelty. A man doesn't grow out of beating an elderly veteran on the steps of a memorial and then laughing about it. A man either chooses to be decent, or he chooses to be something else. And you, my son, have chosen wrong. Again and again, you have chosen wrong." Brandon was crying now, openly. "Dad, please." Captain Mitchell turned back to Judge Caprio. "Your Honor, I know there are people who expect me to use my position to help my son. There are people who think I will make phone calls, pull strings, call in favors. There are people who believe that because I am a police chief, my son will receive a lighter sentence." He straightened his spine. "I am here to tell this court, in front of God and everyone present, that I will do no such thing. I will not make a single phone call. I will not speak to a single prosecutor. I will not interfere in any way with the proceedings of this court." The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. "More than that," Captain Mitchell continued, his voice rising, "I am asking you, I am begging you, to treat my son exactly as you would treat any other defendant who committed this crime. Apply the law. Apply it fully. Apply it without mercy, if that is what justice requires. Dad, no, Brandon shouted, rising from his seat. You can't do this to me. Sit down. Captain Mitchell's voice thundered, and Brandon collapsed back into his chair as if struck. The captain turned to face his son fully. You did this to yourself, Brandon. Every choice you made led you here. And I enabled you. I protected you when I should have let you face consequences. I bailed you out when I should have let you learn. I am as responsible for the man you've become as you are. He took a shaky breath. But that ends today. No more protection. No more excuses. You will face justice, Brandon. Real justice. And I pray to God that somewhere in this process you find the man you were supposed to be. The man I should have raised you to be. Captain Mitchell turned back to Judge Caprio, and the courtroom saw tears streaming down the face of a man who had probably not cried in decades. Your Honor, I apologize to Mr. Patterson. I apologize to this court. I apologize to the people of this city who trusted me to uphold the law, only to watch my own son spit on everything I claimed to stand for. He walked slowly toward Mr. Patterson's wheelchair. I followed him. He knelt, this powerful man, this pillar of law enforcement, knelt before the frail veteran in the wheelchair. Mr. Patterson, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what my son did to you. You deserved honor. You deserved respect. And instead, my son gave you pain. That is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Mr. Patterson reached out with a trembling hand and placed it on Captain Mitchell's shoulder. Get up, son, the old veteran said quietly. A father shouldn't kneel for the sins of his child. You did the right thing today. That took more courage than most people have. Captain Mitchell rose slowly, nodded once, and walked back to his seat in the last row of the courtroom. Judge Caprio sat in silence for a long moment, visibly moved. Then he looked at Brandon Mitchell, who sat slumped in his chair, face buried in his hands, sobbing. Mr. Mitchell, the judge said quietly, your father just did something extraordinary. He chose justice over blood. He chose principle over protection. He chose honor over comfort. I want you to remember this moment for the rest of your life. I want you to understand what real courage looks like. Because what your father just did, that is courage. What you did to Mr. Patterson was cowardice. Brandon couldn't speak. His body shook with sobs. This court will take a 15-minute recess, Judge Caprio announced. When we return, I will deliver my sentence. 15 minutes later, the courtroom reconvened. Brandon Mitchell sat with his head bowed, a broken man. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. In its place was something raw, exposed, and deeply human. Judge Frank Caprio took his seat and arranged his papers slowly, deliberately. The silence was absolute. Mr. Mitchell, he began, I have been on this bench for over 40 years. In that time, I have learned that the purpose of justice is not merely to punish, it is to protect society, to hold individuals accountable, and when possible, to transform them. True justice considers not only the crime but the possibility of redemption. He paused, looking directly at Brandon. Your crime was serious. Aggravated assault against an elderly veteran. A man who served this country with distinction, who gave back to his community for 30 years, who asked you only for basic courtesy, and was repaid with violence and mockery. This court cannot and will not treat such an offense lightly. Brandon nodded slowly, unable to meet the judge's eyes. However, I have also witnessed something today that I rarely see in this courtroom. I saw your father, a man of impeccable reputation, stand before this court and refuse to protect you. I saw him choose justice over family. I saw him show you what true accountability looks like. Judge Caprio leaned forward. That gives me hope. Not certainty. Hope. Hope that somewhere inside you there is a man worthy of a father like that. A man capable of change. A man who can look at what he did and feel genuine shame, not because he got caught, but because he hurt another human being. He picked up a document. Brandon Mitchell, I hereby sentence you to the following. First, 18 months in the Rhode Island Adult Correctional Institution. You will serve a minimum of 12 months before being eligible for parole. Second, upon release, you will complete 500 hours of community service at veterans organizations throughout Rhode Island. You will serve those who served this country. You will learn their names, hear their stories, and understand what sacrifice really means. Third, you will attend mandatory anger management and empathy counseling for 2 years following your release. Fourth, you will write a formal letter of apology to Mr. Harold Patterson, not today, not next week, but after you have served at least 6 months of your sentence. I want that letter to come from a place of genuine understanding, not legal strategy. Fifth, you are hereby ordered to pay full restitution for all of Mr. Patterson's medical expenses, rehabilitation costs, and home care needs, for the rest of his life if necessary. Finally, you will, upon your release, speak publicly at high schools and community centers about your crime, your consequences, and your journey. You will share your story, not to glorify yourself, but to warn others about the path you chose and where it leads. Judge Caprio set down the document. This sentence is severe, Mr. Mitchell, but it is also an opportunity. Use your time wisely. Read, reflect, grow. Become the man your father believes you can be. And when you emerge, show this community, show Mr. Patterson, show yourself that you are capable of something better. He turned to Captain Mitchell, who sat rigid in the back row. Captain Mitchell, do you wish to address the court? The police chief rose slowly. Your Honor, I accept and support the court's ruling. I would like to add for the record that in addition to the court sentence, I will be implementing personal consequences for my son. He faced Brandon. When you are released, you will not return to the family home. You will not receive financial support from me. You will find your own apartment, your own job, and build your own life from the ground up. Everything you have, your car, your trust fund, your credit cards, will be liquidated and donated to veterans' charities in Mr. Patterson's name. Brandon closed his eyes, tears streaming. If, and only if, you demonstrate genuine change over the next 3 years, we will discuss rebuilding our relationship. But you will earn your place in this family, Brandon. You will earn your place in society. You will earn back your name. He sat down heavily. Judge Caprio nodded. Mr. Patterson, would you like to make a final statement? The elderly veteran was wheeled forward once more. He looked at Brandon for a long moment, then at Captain Mitchell, then at the gallery of supporters who had come for him. Your Honor, I've had a lot of time to think since that night. Time in the hospital. Time in rehabilitation. Time in pain. And you know what I thought about most? I thought about all the young men I served with in Korea. Boys, really, 17, 18, 19 years old. Some of them died before they ever had a chance to become who they were supposed to be. His voice grew stronger. This young man hurt me. He hurt me badly. But he's still alive. He still has a chance. And I've spent my whole life believing in second chances, because someone gave one to me once, a long time ago. He looked directly at Brandon. I don't forgive you yet, son. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out like candy. It's something that's earned. But I will tell you this, I'll be watching. We'll all be watching. And if you do the work, if you really change, then one day, maybe, we can shake hands like men. Not today. Not soon. But someday. Brandon looked up for the first time, his face swollen with tears. Mr. Patterson, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. It was the first genuine apology he had given. The old veteran nodded slowly. "That's a start, son. That's a start." Epilogue. 18 months later. The Rhode Island Veterans Memorial Center was hosting its annual community dinner. Hundreds of people filled the hall: veterans, families, volunteers, local officials. At the serving line, wearing a simple white apron, stood a young man with closely cropped hair and humble eyes. He ladled soup into bowls, smiled at each person who passed, and called many of the veterans by name. Brandon Mitchell had been released from prison 3 months earlier. He had served his full 18 months, no early release, no special treatment. He had emerged quieter, thinner, and something had changed behind his eyes. True to his father's word, he had found his own apartment, a small studio in a working-class neighborhood. He had found a job as a warehouse worker, loading trucks from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. And every afternoon, without fail, he came to the Veterans Center to complete his community service. But the 500 hours had ended 2 weeks ago. He kept coming anyway. "Mitchell," called an old voice from across the room. Brandon looked up to see Harold Patterson wheeling himself over, slowly, but under his own power now. Months of physical therapy had restored some of his mobility. Brandon set down his ladle and walked over, kneeling to meet the old man's eyes. "Mr. Patterson, how are you feeling today?" "Better than yesterday. Worse than tomorrow. That's how it goes at my age." The veteran studied Brandon's face carefully. "You're still here?" "Yes, sir." "Your hours are done?" "Yes, sir." "Then why?" Brandon was quiet for a moment. "Because I owe a debt I can never fully repay, sir. And because these people taught me something. About service. About honor. About what it means to give instead of take. I spent my whole life taking. I don't want to live that way anymore." Harold Patterson was silent for a long moment. Then he extended his weathered hand. Brandon stared at it, his eyes filling with tears. Slowly, reverently, he took the old man's hand and shook it. "That's for effort, son," Mr. Patterson said. "Not forgiveness, not yet. But effort. You're doing the work. Keep doing it." "I will, sir. I promise." From across the room, standing quietly in the doorway, Captain Richard Mitchell watched his son, really watched him, for the first time in years. He saw a young man serving food with humility. He saw genuine smiles exchanged with people who had once wanted to see him destroyed. He saw transformation. He wasn't ready to embrace his son. Not yet. The wounds were too deep, the shame still too fresh. But for the first time in 18 months, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Hope.